Colorado has finally made their hire, and I'm a big fan because it's coming down from the NFL ranks. Robert Livingston is the new defensive coordinator for the Colorado Buffaloes. Joining me to talk about it, Kevin Borba, the host of Locked On Buffs, joining me on Locked On College Football. Kevin, I like this move. You bring in a guy that's got that sort of pedigree. It's consistent with what Coach Prime has looked for in his staff. He wants people that have an NFL background, and you know, he spent the last 6 years, Livingston has, coaching the safeties, 8 total on the Bengals defensive staff. I like the move. What do you make of it?
I think it's a great move. I also think it's a risky move. And I think those two things could be synonymous. Realistically, he has a lot of NFL experience, which Coach Prime has kind of talked about. He wants his staff to be NFL-esque. They want to treat the team like it's an NFL team and give those guys the proper tools to succeed. And I think someone who has this much talent and coaching experience at the NFL level works. He also was a scout, so I feel like that kind of translates to recruiting. Where I would get concerned is he's never coordinated a defense. Is he ready to go from positional coach to coordinator? Obviously, he's been in the league for a hot minute, and I feel like you kind of learn by osmosis and you learn just by being around fellow play callers. But is he ready to kind of be the guy that's like, okay, this is my entire unit. This is what I control. But I do think he's young, which is a great hire as well. College kids love playing for young coaches. And so I think there's a lot of pros, but I do think it's a little risky to kind of go with someone who had no coordinating experience.
I think there is an element of risk involved with that, to be sure. But it doesn't remind me, as you were bringing that up, I was thinking about Brandon Staley, who had some risk with him because felt like on his NFL coaching journey, he kind of skipped a couple of steps to be the Rams DC. He was that for 1 year, and then he was the head coach. The difference here with Livingston is, yeah, he hasn't coordinated a defense before, but he's been around a lot of high-level coaches in the NFL. I mean, the Bengals DC the last several years, Lou Anarumo, I think is how you pronounce his name, that guy's really good. Really, really good. And so being under a guy like that, I think gives me some confidence in this particular move. Yeah, there could be an adjustment period there, but I looked at what Staley went through and it was, okay, I think this was a little early. And yeah, he hasn't called a defense before, but it's not too early. It feels like this is kind of the natural jumping off point to me to have the ability to call plays.
Yeah, and I also think it helps. You have Coach Prime's coaching staff, which I don't think a lot of people realize. There's former head coaches on there. So if he ever has, let's say, confusion or just like questions, he has people there to help him out. And obviously it's not like he's some dude that just picked up coaching like a month ago. Like, he's been around the block. It's just not in the defensive coordinator capacity. And also he's inheriting a really good group of players. I think had he inherited like last year's defense, I don't know what the difference could be, but they upgraded in the portal. So he has talent around him in the coaching room. And then obviously he has talent on the field that he should be able to maximize. And realistically, Coach Prime, very knowledgeable fella. People forget, maybe they shouldn't forget, but he has a gold jacket. The dude knows a thing or two about football. So I think Mr. Robert Livingston is in good company, and he's proven to kind of put guys in good positions. Jesse Bates has been really good under him. He's been All-Pro twice in the past couple of years. So for that to translate to the college level, I think is something, I won't say it's for certain, but realistically, he has the pedigree, like you mentioned, he has the experience. And like you said, it's the next step. It's just like a little risky to me to go from position coach to all of a sudden you're running a defense for a team that, whether people want to admit or not, is going to be the most scrutinized team in college football. Like, is he ready for that? We don't know, because he will instantly be the scapegoat if things go wrong.
Well, he could. I mean, we saw it last year. You know, Sean Lewis was the offensive coordinator. The offense was just fine, and then they stripped him of those duties. He's now the head coach at San Diego State in the coaching carousel, and I did not like what Colorado did with him in that particular role. I didn't think that was the right move at all. The problem was the defense, and that is where Robert Livingston is going to come in and really have to make an impact immediately. Is, yeah, there is a challenge. There's an unknown element to him, and I think those are fair questions to ask, but Colorado's win total, it has been bumped up to 5.5. Many are saying because of the influence of Locked On College Football, but that's just
and Locked On Buffs
and Locked On Buffs. Yes, of course, the two Locked On shows. So you were also on the 4.5. Give me the over all day, every day. I
was projecting 6 before it was at 5.5.
I still like him over 5.5 as well. But there were real issues on Colorado's defense last year. The offense, they didn't run the ball consistently, but that's really because their offensive line was overmatched, and he had a great quarterback in Deion Sanders. They have addressed the offensive line. I like that. They have also addressed their defensive line, bringing in guys like B.J. Green. There are other players in the portal who you can speak to that are going to be key cogs in the defense for Robert Livingston this year. But what are the biggest issues that he's got to come in and solve on that side of the ball that he's now coordinating?
Yeah, I think for one, and this isn't even football related, it's discipline. This team had so many costly penalties on defense. The Stanford game stands out just because, one, they blew a 29-point lead, but I think they had like 4 or 5 like illegal substitutions. One of them was after a TV timeout. So timeout ends, 13 guys or 12 guys run onto the field. Like that can't happen. There was a lot of like defensive holdings, late hits on the quarterback, like discipline, like kind of get the culture in the right area. Also physicality on the defense line and stopping the run. The Big 12 has Devin Neal, they have Taj Brooks, they have talented running backs. Utah has a stable of running backs. They have talented running backs all over the place, and Colorado was horrendous against the run last season. So if they can't stop the run, they're not going to win games. I will say though, he did inherit a better roster. Like realistically, I look at this Colorado defense, and I did a depth chart projection a couple this past week, and me and Scott Proctor from the USA Today, we had, I think, 3 guys from last season that will start this year on defense. It was Travis Hunter, Shiloh Sanders, and then one of the linebackers. Everyone else, or maybe 2 of the linebackers, so 4 guys at the most. Everyone else is going to be a transfer or someone new. Like there's going to be a whole new unit. Everyone that started last year is probably going to go into like a rotational piece or reserve role, and I think that's what they needed. None of those guys, or most of those guys, were not really starting caliber. It was just they started out of necessity. So he needs to get them more physical, more disciplined, and realistically, they just need to be better all around because they were bad at pretty much everything.
Yeah, I like what you said about the discipline. There were a lot of undisciplined moments, whether it was an unsportsmanlike penalty or I remember the substitutions against Stanford and Colorado State. Both, I think, were just it was a mess. It
happened too frequently.
Yes,
and then also this just goes for the team as a whole. They had such a bad time substituting. Like they were not aware of the rule where like when they could substitute, when they couldn't substitute, like on defense. I think they honestly thought they could just substitute freely. And it's like, there's rules to prevent certain things.
It felt very chaotic at points
Yes.
last year. So I'm glad that you brought that up. You talked about addressing the run defense, but does he have the personnel to coordinate a defense that's just top half in the Big 12? Because if they do, with what they've done on the offensive line and Deion Sanders at quarterback, that could be a 7-8 win team.
Yeah, I think the defense realistically could take a step to being in that top echelon. They have 2 pass rushers that had 5 sacks last season, Samuel O from Pitt, and then they also have B.J. Green from ASU, like you mentioned, all Pac-12 guy. They have guys that are really good, experienced, and proven, and they didn't have that last year. And so I wouldn't say they could be the best defense in the Big 12 because I haven't seen them play together. We don't even really know what scheme Robert Livingston would prefer, but it's such a much better roster where it's like, it would not shock me if they are a world's better defense, because if they're not, it's like, was this the right hire? That would be the question I would be asking at the end of the year. If Colorado is still one of the worst defenses in the country and in the Big 12, it's like, okay, is it a talent issue or is it a coaching issue? But I think realistically, he has the keys, the players, to kind of succeed realistically in this new Big 12.
Kevin Borba, host of Locked on Buffs. We've got more coming up on today's show. It's Cruton time because I've got a question to ask. And we've got Brian Smith coming up next, but we'll let Kevin go for now. Kevin, thanks so much for stopping by.